Hello, my name is Solveig Hodnemyr. I live a privileged and protected life. I will most likely never need to flee for my life. My daily challenges mainly consist of trying to get all of my homework done on time. The realities of the world are distant, and the closest I will come to a UN refugee camp is the images I see on TV. However, I feel the need to ask the question, what is the UN good for? People are starving, dying of easily curable diseases. Millions of civilians die in war. Sometimes it feels like the world is crumbling at our feet. And the one organization that should have the power to do something about all of this suffering, that one organization sits with their hands in their laps, spitting out a few diplomatic accusations towards one another. The United Nations is an organization founded in 1945 to unite the people of the world and to prevent war. Today, 193 states have ratified the agreement and are a part of this organization. Within the UN, there are numerous organizations that work with different issues. UNICEF, who are working to protect children's rights, UNHCR, which is supposed to secure and protect refugees, and the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, which I think we should take a closer look at. The International Court of Justice can, in some ways, illustrate how the UN actually functions. It is the place where military and government officials are to be held accountable for their actions. The people with power now have to answer to someone. This is also where the international laws and disputes regarding sovereignty and borders are to be solved. However, some of the most powerful nations have never and refuse to have their citizens prosecuted in this court. And they also say that this court does not have the jurisdiction to rule on matters of their borders, for instance. The United States is the most obvious example here. They have chosen to never validate the court themselves, but have been eager participants in the prosecution of several African military leaders. A recent concrete example of a case between China and the Philippines shows some of the tendencies for the rulings made in the ICJ. It is fairly complex, but bear with me. The Philippines chose to bring China to the ICJ for a ruling on whether parts of the South China Sea belonged to them. China had blocked Philippine fishermen and others from using the area. China has also, over time, built various military bases on some of the uninhabited islands in the sea. The area lies in the Philippines' economic section, and they therefore argued that the Chinese were occupying their land. The US and other nations like Vietnam have all been pretty clear on their standings in the issue. China has, on the other hand, stated that the ICJ and their decisions will have no effect on their future behavior in the area. So they are basically saying that the decisions made by the International Court of Justice do not apply to the great nation of China. Both the United States and Russia have expressed the same opinion about the value of a ruling in the ICJ. So, if this is how the International Court of Justice works, the less powerful nations have to abide whilst the most powerful nations in the world do not have to listen, I will sympathize with the states that point to that unfairness and obvious double standard. Larger nations can ignore international laws and do what is convenient for them. And there are plenty of international laws and agreements that prohibit, for instance, American or Turkish involvement in Syria, as it was when Norway and America and France wrongfully engaged in Libya. However, they still in some ways managed to participate in the war. Do we think they will ever have to answer for those actions in the ICJ? Probably not. At the beginning of 2016, over 60 million people were fleeing from an authority in their state, a war, or other catastrophes. This statistic does not include the people who had to move away from their homes as the result of a natural disaster. 60 million human beings, forced to leave everything they know and leave behind their lives. 100,000 refugees were relocated through programs like the Quota Refugee Scheme of the UN. The remaining 59,900,000 individuals, what are we doing about them? In Norway, it is my experience that we often have a very uncritical view on the UN and their work. With these discussions, it is not my intention to say that the United Nations is a waste of space organization that does nothing good for the world's population. It's not the good-for-nothing UN, because they do good, organizing humanitarian relief after various catastrophes. They provide some type of shelter to people who have been forced to leave their homes. They're an area where government officials can meet and build relations. There are plenty of positives with the UN, but we need to dare to be critical. The United Nations has great potential. It could be the platform that almost single-handedly saves millions of human lives. With that kind of an important task, we need to always work for the United Nations being the best that it can be. The people of the world deserve that. This means taking a look at the structuring, where some powerful states have the power to shut down operations that could be extremely positive just because it is in their own interest. That's when we get situations like we have in Syria, like we have in Palestine, where states veto most of the suggestions. Syria and Palestine are caught in conflicts that never seem to go to an end because of all of these international conflicting interests. People are banging on the door for help, but the industrialized and fortunate parts of the world don't seem to want to open. Such a resource-demanding organization that the UN actually is should continuously strive to be all that it can be, to do all the good that it can. There are no excuses good enough when it comes to not saving a human life, when it comes to not opening that knocking door. For the UN to be good for more than nothing, and for the UN to be a legitimate and powerful organization, it needs to acknowledge the challenges and then face them head on. The world needs the UN to be good for more than something right now. Critical voices are rising, and we need to see the value of this organization. Because for one human being, the United Nations could end up meaning everything.